I'm delighted to welcome Benjamin Rae this afternoon. And Benjamin is an English teacher. He works for STP Training, which is a company based in a town called Viladecans, which is near Barcelona in Spain. Ben, it's an absolute pleasure to have you, and so wonderful for our young people to hear about somebody who's working overseas. Doing a job. We've interviewed lots of local people in Sussex, in the south of England. So it's really lovely to welcome you and to find out more about what you do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So first of all, can you tell us a bit about what your job involves and what your day looks like as an English teacher?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, my job is not the typical teaching job. That I don't work in a public school or even an independent school. I work for a language academy, and we focus mostly on extracurricular language training for children and also for adults and businesses. So a typical day for me would be getting up in the morning, of course. And normally in the mornings, we would have classes with adults, going to different companies. We get to meet a lot of people. I get to go into the office, see where they work, speak to them, teach them English. And then normally I have a bit of downtime in the middle of the day before I start again in the afternoon. Normally when the schools start to finish and people start to finish work. So from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd start again, and I'd have classes with children, maybe some teenagers and also some adults in the afternoon. And then home time, and that's when I get to prepare for the next day. I look at my classes and I create a schedule and plan my next classes. Yeah.
So very similar to a teacher in the school Shoreham Academy, where a lot of our students are watching this. You've got to prepare that class. You've got to write that lesson plan. Exactly.
Yeah. It takes a lot of creativity, I think, to when you have a class in the morning with somebody who works in an accounting office, and then in the afternoon you have got a bunch of 5-year-olds that you have to entertain with song and dance. So I think without taking that time to prepare your classes,
they wouldn't flow and you could lose your thread.
No,
because you
exactly.
It's always good to have that baseline to go back to, isn't it?
Yeah, I was always told if you go into a class without preparing it, the children will eat you alive.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, and the teachers watching this, because our teachers will be watching these videos as well, will totally agree with you there, Ben. Absolutely. Yeah. What I'm really interested to get across to our students is the way you teach English, because it's quite unique, isn't it? The way that because you teach English in English.
Yeah, I even with very young children, I try my best to never speak to them in their own language. So I grew up in Scotland, and I learned French at school. And my French classes were sitting in a classroom, listening to my teacher speak in English, and then they would give us some French words, and we would hear French audio recordings, and I would never actually get the chance to speak French. I'd read books, I'd fill in gaps in grammar books, but I would never actually speak. And we try to encourage our students to speak as much as possible in the language from the beginning, Of course, very young children need a little bit of help, if they want to, the typical things like, I need to go to the toilet, they need to say that in their own language, and we have to understand them. But we try our best to never go back to Spanish. Yeah. Yeah.
And that must be hard now, maybe. You're doing these classes virtually. If you were to start teaching an adult who doesn't speak a single word of English yet, and you're doing it in this format, how does that work?
It is tricky. It is tricky, but fortunately, I mean, with teaching online, we have so many fantastic tools that we can include in our classes at the click of a button, because we've got we can send links, we can open videos, we can share our screen. That there are a lot of things that we can do, which would be the same with an adult. One of the things that happens here in Spain is that we never, unless we're working with children, we never tend to start from zero with an adult, because they've had a little bit of English here and there throughout their life. And I have never really found someone that didn't know anything. You know, they all knew something. But online, I've worked with some people from South America who have had basically zero. They're starting from zero. And generally, it's a little bit of experimenting with them, you know, what they can read, what they can't read, a lot of repetition. But with them, it's still very beneficial for the student if we never go back to Spanish. You know, they need to start in English from day one.
Yeah, I think that's such an important way of learning. And like you, I learned French at school by rote. So, you know, from an English person. So I think it's really, really valuable the way you teach. What would you say you enjoy? What do you enjoy the most about your job, Ben?
One of the things that I enjoy the most is meeting people, like and talking to people. I love talking. I love talking. So I find myself often finishing a day at work and talking to colleagues and students after the class and getting into deep, meaningful conversations. I mean, when we're teaching more advanced students, we bring up interesting topics that are really fun and interesting to talk about, you know. And often in a class, if there are groups which don't, I mean, we've got a group of 4 and a group of 3, well, the teacher will join in with one group to sort of balance the numbers a little bit. And we get into some really interesting conversations. We get to see into the minds of young people, you know, talking about things like euthanasia, animal cruelty, and all of these topics. And it's really fascinating to sort of be in that environment. Also, from teaching online, now we get the chance to meet people from all over the world, from South America, from Italy, from France, that working here in the town, I wouldn't get the chance to meet these people. Yeah.
It has opened up the world, hasn't it? You know, I quite often attend meetings that I would never have had the time to physically go on a train to London to meet with people, but it takes a minute to click online. It's fantastic. And our young people are learning this way. That's exactly how they learn. That's why these videos are so useful, because it gives the students a chance it opens the door a little bit to them seeing into different jobs, which they wouldn't normally be able to do. So actually, they wouldn't normally get to meet you, Ben. So this is really positive.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Fantastic. Ben, we talked a little bit before we came online about the skills that we use at the Academy. So we encourage our students to develop their soft skills, because you can learn a job. A company or an organisation can train you to do the job you need to do. But what you're coming to it with is the character that you've built and the person that you built. Out of those skills that were listed, which 3 would you say are the most important in your role, and why?
It's difficult to choose only 3, but leadership, I think, is super important for the teacher. Anybody in authority who has a leadership role needs to have good leadership skills. Aiming high, I think, is also really important. And of course, a little bit of creativity can help in all walks of life, in my opinion.
Because as you said, you especially with young ones, I would imagine you've got to find ways to keep them engaged in learning, and maybe doing games with them and things like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, and online, I found myself right here this morning in front of this camera singing and dancing to children. So I'm not going to do it now, but yeah, you've got to find ways to get them entertained. I've had children running laps of their table, you know, to try and count laps of your tables to practice the numbers to 10 and all of these things, because they're at home, they're bored, they haven't been out for a long time, you know, to burn all of this energy that they have. So yeah, it's all about adapting and finding new ways to do what we've always done. And really, that's the most important thing, is if we can apply sort of a little bit of creativity to everything, we can adapt things in marvelous new ways that, I mean, I always tell people that if you'd want to teach a lesson online, well, create your lesson plan for a normal classroom and then just adapt it, So look at every activity and think about how can you adapt it. So, for example, a traffic light system. If it's green, then use it as you would in a normal classroom. If it's orange, amber, then maybe you've got to do things a little bit differently because you can't give the student a piece of paper, Okay, so you send them a document, or you use Google Classroom. If it's red, well, okay, you're going to have to reinvent the wheel because that activity needs sort of some physical interaction that we can't do online. But I find that with a little bit of creativity, these online classes, we can really achieve almost the same as what we wanted to do before. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, actually, that takes me on really nicely to our young people are at home and they are having to think about how they fill their time and how they learn. Many young people will be waiting to go into employment and they want the best chance. Is there any advice you would give to a young person who's maybe, especially if they're interested in the sort of thing that you do, that they could be doing now while they're stuck at home? They maybe can't go out for the next month or so. What can they do?
I would say take advantage of the internet. The internet is marvelous. I have done a lot of online courses and education. In fact, the majority of the Spanish that I learned through YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't take classes very often. I took classes with some private teachers to help with certain topics that I found very difficult. But I would watch YouTube videos. I would try to copy what I could hear in the videos. I would find books online and PDFs and read them. And also, I found people online who wanted to learn English. So they would talk to me in Spanish for half an hour, and I would talk to them in English for half an hour.
Oh.
And we would create these sort of language exchanges, and they were great. I got to meet people. I got to learn a language. And I got to teach a language a little bit. Before I started teaching, I got to really start to learn how to teach people, how to correct people, how to help people with that. Yeah.
That's really valuable. I've not heard. Did that come about by accident, that language exchange, or is there an actual place you can go for that?
There are many places that you can find these language exchanges, and just a quick search on Google, language exchange or tandem will bring up a lot of results. I found a few different applications as well on the mobile phone that had these language exchange chats, and they can match you with somebody in another country who can help you and you can help them. And yeah, it was great. It was great.
That's really valuable, and actually something the students may not realize, because you live in Spain, so you speak Spanish and you teach English, but you didn't do Spanish at school.
No. I started learning Spanish when I was 21, and I am 27 now. So it hasn't been that long. I learned French at school, and French didn't go down well with me because I wanted to learn German, but it didn't fit into my high school timetable. So I had a bit of a grudge against French. And I regret it. I regret not learning French at school, but I always thought I would never learn languages. My parents didn't know any languages. My grandparents didn't know any languages. I mean, we were, I suppose, a bit closed-minded in that sense. And at 21, I decided, okay, I want to see the world. I want to leave the UK for a while, and I just had the motivation to learn. And a year later, I found myself in Spain teaching English. And yeah, I wouldn't say my Spanish was perfect, but yeah, it definitely gets me by.
And there's another language where you live, isn't there? Are you Catalan? Are you learning that too? Catalan,
yeah. I actually recently got in the post my B1 certificate for Catalan, which is like an intermediate level. So I've been doing Catalan classes, and in the run up to the quarantine, I was taking classes, but they stopped, and I got the certificate in the post to say that I'd finished that level. And yeah, it's a little bit different, but I think once you learn one language, it gets a little bit easier to learn other ones. And one of the things that helped me with learning Spanish was actually learning a little bit more about English, because we don't learn grammar when we're at school in the same way that you learn a grammar when you're learning a second language. And understanding the grammar, English grammar, helped me sort of apply that to the Spanish and understand how language worked. Yeah.
And with that learning, what qualification do you need to have to be a professional language teacher? What is it you needed to take?
Well, in Spain, the majority of places will ask for some sort of language teaching certificate focused on teaching English as a second or a foreign language. There is one of the most famous certificates is called the CELTA test. The CELTA certificate, and this is through the University of Cambridge, their language teaching section. They have the CELTA, and normally you would go to a center that trains teachers, and for about a month you'd be doing classes, doing teaching practice, and you would then be ready to teach English as a foreign language. Most places ask for a bachelor's degree as well. But actually, Spain is one of the few countries that you can actually get by without a bachelor's degree and just with a certificate. There are even some certificates that you can do online at home.
Okay.
There's one that I know of called tefl.org.uk, I think is the website. They're based in Dingwall in Scotland, and they also do some online certificates, and maybe you would have to go and do some teaching practice one weekend. But most of these certificates have had to adapt to the current situation and are also offering training online now instead of these month-long intensive training courses.
Right. So potentially, if a young person has finished their A-levels, they could, if they've got the funding, they could go and do that TEFL course and effectively become qualified to teach English. And of course, students, that doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to another country to do that, because people come to our country. I know they're not at the moment, I understand that, but in normal circumstances, we've got teaching, we've got language schools in England and throughout the whole of the UK where people would come to us. So there may be people who've done their TEFL job, Ben, who've stayed here in the UK, and they teach people who come to us. So there's lots of different ways you can use it, aren't there?
Exactly, yeah. Most of the universities in the UK, as far as I'm aware, have a lot of international students who come a year before they actually want to start studying to learn English. And they spend 1 year learning English, and then they enter the university. And what I would recommend as well is volunteering. Volunteering is a great way of getting started, because when I wanted to know if teaching would be right for me, I went to my local council offices and found out that they had an office. It was one office with one worker who dealt with teaching English to refugees, teaching English to immigrants, and anybody who needed help with English. And I started volunteering for that department as just a helper. We would go to the library once a week, and we'd have a group of people, and we'd try to have conversations in English, and even helping them with their bills, and calling their telephone supplier as well to fix a problem. We would help with all sorts of things. Yeah.
That's really good advice. I mean, obviously we're in a slightly unusual situation at the moment, but this isn't going to go on forever, and that's a really good idea.
It's very possible that these council departments are continuing to do this on Zoom or on somewhere else. So I think reaching out to the council and finding out if they have an English as a second language department is probably very, very useful.
Mm, mm. Well, what I'll do is I'll do some research on behalf of you students and put that at the end of the video, so you can see you know, anything like that that would be useful. That's brilliant, Ben. Is there anything else you want to add that would be valuable and useful for the students?
I think the most important thing is, if you want to do something in life that involves a big change, like moving to another country, or picking something that you don't you're not sure if that's for you. The most important thing is to remember that whatever decision you make is not the final decision. You know, that's not going to dictate the rest of your life. You can change your mind. You can do something and try it, and then try something else. I didn't start teaching until I was in my sort of early to mid 20s, and I did many things before that, and I'm sure that the experiences that I gained doing other things have helped me, but I took the time to really decide what I needed to do. I tried things. Some things were great, some things weren't great, but in the end, don't be afraid. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
And how old were you when you moved to Spain?
I think I was 22, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 5 years ago. I was 22. Yeah.
Quite a big change, isn't it? From, you know, when you're, as you know, if it's not something that's within your family and you suddenly decide to go and live somewhere completely different. It
is, yeah, it is. And when you're first spending like your first few weeks in a new country alone and without family, it's a big change, but you get very used to it. And if anybody does go to another country, I'd recommend that they try to make local friends, because that's what's really going to help you learn a language and learn about a culture and survive. Make local friends, join an association and volunteer in another country. That helps you with the language as well. Yeah.
And that's what's great about the internet, isn't it? Because you can actually get to know people. If you're thinking of going somewhere, you can meet those people well in advance and start building those relationships online. You can talk anywhere in the world, which is wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Ben, thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really valuable. And yes, students, I will make sure to add as many links as possible so that if it's something that you're interested in, you know where to go. But yes, thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks for having me.